I'm Becky Durham. I'm the pastor of Peace Presbyterian Church in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and this is the Sunday sermon for February 6th, 2022. Our Old Testament reading for today comes from Isaiah chapter 6, verses 1 through 8. Listen now for the word of God. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne high and lofty, and the hem of his robe filled the temple. Seraphs were in attendance above him. Each had 6 wings. With 2 they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they flew. And one called to another and said, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory." The pivots on the thresholds shook at the voices of those who called, and the house filled with smoke. And I said, "Woe is me, I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. Yet my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." Then one of the seraphs flew to me, holding a live coal that had been taken from the altar with a pair of tongs. The seraph touched my mouth with it and said, "Now that this has touched your lips, your guilt has departed and your sin is blotted out." Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" And I said, "Here am I, send me." Let us pray. God, we thank you for your word, and we thank you for your calling, and we pray today as we hear your word proclaimed that we would respond as you call us. In Jesus' name, amen. Our gospel reading comes from Luke chapter 5, verses 1 through 11. Once while Jesus was standing beside the Lake of Gnessaret and the crowd was pressing in on him to hear the word of God, he saw 2 boats there at the shore of the lake. The fishermen had gotten out of them and were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little way from the shore. Then Jesus sat down and taught the crowds from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep water and let down your nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we've worked all night long but have caught nothing. Yet, if you say so, I will let down the nets." When they had done this, they caught so many fish that their nets were beginning to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled both boats so that they began to sink. But when Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." For he and all who were with him were amazed at the catch of fish that they had taken. And so also were James and John, sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. Then Jesus said to Simon, "Do not be afraid. From now on, you will be catching people." When they had brought their boats to shore, they left everything and followed him. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. All right, so there's a children's book, and if you've had children or grandchildren in the last 40 years, you may be familiar with it. It's a picture book. It's called "If You Give a Mouse a Cookie." It is by Laura Numeroff, illustrated by Felicia Bond. If you give a mouse a cookie, he'll ask for a glass of milk, and then a straw, and then a napkin, all because you give him a cookie. There's an seemingly endless stream of things that the mouse will want or need until on the second to last page, he asks for a glass of milk. He's thirsty. And that glass of milk prompts him to ask for another cookie. It's a cause and effect book. It's simple for children to understand and memorize so that they could read it to you. And there are several spin-offs. There's "If You Give a Pig a Pancake," "If You Give a Moose a Muffin." Fun picture books. Maybe before his time and writing for an older reader, Luke writes the same sort of story here. It's cause and effect. What happens when Jesus gets into your boat? Because as disciples then and as disciples now, that's where it starts. Jesus gets into our boats. Jesus gets into our boats. The first time it happened, Jesus is dealing with a crowd on the shoreline. They're pressing in on him. In Luke's gospel, he's been to Capernaum. He's been to Nazareth. He's been teaching and healing and gathering this crowd who want to hear the word of God. Verse 1, they're pressing in on Jesus to hear the word of God. At the shore where Jesus is, there are 2 fishing boats, and the operators of the boats are done fishing and they're washing their nets. Does Jesus know these men? If we're just reading in Luke, it seems like maybe he doesn't, but if we have read John's gospel, and particularly the first chapter of John's gospel, we realize there may be more to the story than what Luke is telling us right here. And that Jesus met Simon when Simon's brother Andrew, a disciple of John the Baptist, introduced him to Jesus, saying, "We have found the Messiah." I think there's a basis for this relationship. Jesus is not on this particular shoreline with these particular boats by accident. And today is the day Jesus is going to get into Simon's boat. Verse 3, he got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little way from the shore. Then Jesus sat down and taught the crowds from the boat. It seems that Simon's boat is going to provide a nice floating chancel for Jesus to allow him to teach the crowds without everyone pushing in on him and risking bodily injury to himself or someone else. This crowd didn't know about social distancing. Luke calls this the Lake of Gnessaret, but it's the Sea of Galilee or the Sea of Tiberias, not actually a sea, but it's the biggest freshwater lake in Israel. It's 64 square miles with shorelines in many towns. From a boat a little ways out, Jesus can take advantage of the natural amplification the water will provide and speak to the crowd. If you follow Jesus, at some point, he got into your boat. You may have known who he was before. You may have been raised to know his name. You may not exactly remember the moment he got into your boat, but he did. You were out there living and learning and earning, handling the daily tasks of washing your fishing nets, as it were. And Jesus got into the mix of it and said, let's float out a little ways. It may have happened in a very normal place, your home, your workplace, your church. It may have happened in a way designed for this sort of encounter, confirmation class, Sunday school, a worship service, or it may have happened unexpectedly in a parking lot, at a kitchen table, in the office break room, on the shoreline. But Jesus got into your boat. And you maybe thought he was going to be a well-mannered passenger riding in the boat that you are in charge of, after all. He might make a nice co-pilot, you think. But next thing you know, he's in your business. Jesus gets into our business. He got into our boat, he gets into our business. Jesus is teaching from a floating pulpit. The crowd is gathered on the shore to hear him. In the boat, Simon, presumably, is also listening. He's probably feeling like a celebrity of sorts. Jesus, popular enough to gather a crowd to hear him, has chosen his boat. But Jesus, as we learn, is not calling disciples to celebrity or popularity, but to service. Verse 4, when Jesus had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep water and let down your nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we have worked all night long, but have caught nothing." Jesus is very literally in their business. This is their occupation. Hold on a minute, Jesus. Who are the fishermen here? You are a rabbi. You're a carpenter rabbi and not a fisherman rabbi at that. We've been at this all night. There's nothing to catch. If Jesus gets into our boats, he's also going to get into our business. He'll take charge if we'll let him. And he will ask us to do some things that don't make sense. We may think we know better. We may be tempted to point out the nonsensical nature of his request. You don't understand, Jesus. I've already tried this, or what you're asking me to do. Here's why it won't work. But if we are the disciples that Jesus is calling us to be, we will ultimately yield to his command and let down our nets. As for Simon, he decides to oblige Jesus and do just that. Luke 1:5. Simon continues, "Yet if you say so, I will let down the nets." Jesus got into his boat. Jesus got into his business. Simon thought Jesus was riding with him, but as it turns out, he is riding with Jesus, like that old bumper sticker. If Jesus is your co-pilot, you might want to change seats. Jesus doesn't make a good passenger. He's a much better pilot or captain, which is essentially how Peter addresses him in verse 4. Epistata. Epistata is the Greek, and Luke is the only New Testament writer who uses this word for Jesus, and it's only used by the disciples. It means something like captain or commander or boss. Now, our translators preferred master. I wonder, though, given Peter's occupation as a sailor and a fisherman, if captain might have been a better translation. The completely unexpected happens. Imagine being these fishermen on this day. The nets go down, and verse 6, when they had done this, they caught so many fish that their nets were beginning to break. So they signaled their partners in other boats to come help them, and they came and filled both boats, so they began to sink. For people who just spent hours catching nothing at all, this is extraordinary. They are no doubt experts at their trade of fishing, and yet Jesus has changed everything in one trip out to the deep water at the wrong time of day. Jesus got into Simon's boat, he got into Simon's business, and Simon won't be able to help it. He will submit to Jesus's leadership from now on. Jesus will be part of his very identity, his being, because Jesus gets into our being. Jesus gets into our being. Verse 8, when Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus's knees, saying, "Go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." Something changes in Simon at this moment. No longer is Jesus merely a speaker he's interested in hearing. No longer is Jesus a rabbi he's willing to take instruction from. He now understands that Jesus is something more. Isaiah had the same experience when God got into his boat, as it were. Isaiah 6, which we read earlier, is the prophet Isaiah's call story. Isaiah's vision of the throne room of God with its six-winged seraphs and smoke and earthquake. Confronted by God's holiness, Isaiah cries out, "Woe is me! I am lost. For I am a man of unclean lips. I live among a people of unclean lips. Yet my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." Likewise, Peter cries out, "Go away from me, Lord, for I'm a sinful man." Jesus gets closer than our boat, closer than our business. Jesus wants all of Peter, all of us. In the midst of the ordinary, Jesus has made an extraordinary impact. Like last week's gospel reading with the 180 gallons of wine and the wonder and glory that Jesus shows forth in this instant, in the abundance of grace upon grace, he once again provides a sign that produces so much of something as to be lavish or even ridiculous. The boats are sinking from all the fish. Jesus has also made an abundance of impact on Peter, on his very soul. "I'm unclean," Isaiah cries out. "I'm a sinful man," Peter declares. We may be tempted to think that this just has to do with a confession of sin, standing before God and admitting those things that we do that dishonor and break relationship, those things that our parents told us not to do, those moments when we accommodate temptation. But it's so much more than recognizing sin. What's happening here is that Peter, like Isaiah before him, has glimpsed the awesomeness, the holiness, the wonder, the greatness of God. And he realizes there's not a small leap between himself and the Almighty, but a vast and gaping chasm between Peter and the God in flesh who now stands in his boat. And there are times when we've let Jesus into our boats and we've let Jesus into our business, that we are overwhelmed to the point of surrendering our very being to Jesus. We become aware of how unworthy we are compared to Christ's holiness, Christ's godness, shown forth in an abundance of grace and love and delight. It may happen at an ordinary moment when you become aware of how big God is, or how he is working in your life or the life around you. It may happen as you come to the communion table or the baptismal font and consider the grace of God present for you in the sacraments that we share. Stand back, Lord, for I'm a sinful person. And yet, that is when we are ready, when you are ready, when I am ready to let Jesus become our identity, our reason for being, the captain of our ship. And that's when we're ready to follow him. Isaiah accepts the call of prophet. Here am I, send me. Peter accepts the call of disciple. He leaves everything, including the fish he just caught, and he follows Jesus. And it's not just Simon, but James and John too. And it's not just Simon and James and John, but there are other men and women who become disciples of Jesus, and not just them, but the Apostle Paul and Cornelius and Lydia and an Ethiopian eunuch, and not just them, but countless saints in many times and places, some we know by name and many whom we do not, who surrendered their being to Jesus and followed. And it's not just them, but maybe you too. If Jesus gets into your boat, he may surprise you. He'll ask you to launch out a little bit or pretty far. He'll teach you some things and he'll get in your business. And if he gets into your business, it's probably because he's going to call you into service. And if he calls you to do something, it may not make a lot of sense. But if you're obedient, things might get pretty exciting. You'll maybe glimpse the abundant, overflowing, sink your boat grace of God. And if you experience this abundant grace, you may find that the only thing you can do is give all that you are to whatever Jesus calls you to do. And just like the story with the mouse and the cookie, don't be surprised if you end up back in the boat with Jesus for another adventure. Let us pray. Lord, we surrender our boats, our business, our very selves to you. We are ready to learn how to fish. Help us to trust you and follow you. In Jesus' name, amen. May the Lord bless you and keep you this day and always.